Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So, welcome to another episode of my Decentering Men series. When I make this series on my channel, anyone who comes on here and attempts to argue with me or say negative things will obviously be banned and hidden. But in this episode, I want to talk about the unrealistic expectations that a lot of women have when it comes to marriage in particular. Number one, most marriages either are hypogamous or they will end up being hypogamous. And let me tell you why. Let's say you meet a guy when you're in your 20s, you make $50,000 a year, he makes $60,000 a year, and then you guys get married. Are you telling me that you as a woman can't have a financial success to where you surpass $60,000? You can. And this happens a lot within the context of marriages where a lot of women, they will surpass their husbands financially. So then their marriage becomes hypogamous. A lot of women don't realize that a lot of the marriages they look up to, which I don't know why you're looking up to anyone else's marriage, but a lot of the marriages that women tend to look up to, like Tia Mowry and Megan Good's marriage, a lot of those marriages were hypogamous. Even when it comes to relationships, like, people used to look up to Keke Palmer and Darius Jackson saying, oh, that's so cute. She manifested him. Even when people were big upping Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, that is also a hypogamous relationship. So it's funny how people like to have all of these internal standards, like, oh no, I want a man with money. I want a man that has XYZ. But in reality, a lot of the people that you're looking up to do not even have that. And a lot of you guys are not going to have that. So also, another unpopular opinion that I have when it comes to men is I do not believe that men are natural protectors and providers, and I do not believe that men are natural leaders and that they are naturally more logical than women. I don't believe any of those things because none of those things have been scientifically proven. In fact, if you look up people like Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a double board certified psychiatrist, he actually talks about some of the benefits and advantages that women have over men when he has scanned the brains of tens of thousands of women versus tens of thousands of men. He talks about how a lot of times when it comes to the emotional side of the brain, women are simply more emotionally intelligent. But I notice there's this pervasive stereotype that, oh, women are just emotional and illogical as if we're just stupid. No, women are just emotionally intelligent. And this is why women's friendships tend to have a lot more depth than male to male friendships. A lot of men are naturally extremely competitive. And so I think part of that could be based on biology. I'm not quite sure, but I really think that part of it is based on patriarchy as well, because patriarchy harms men. It makes men hyper competitive with one another. It makes men define their self-worth and self-esteem by how attractive their woman is. And so this is why a lot of male friendships, even though they may last for a long time, they're often very surface level when it comes to their interactions. For example, when's the last time you've heard of a straight male going to his guy friend's house and then crying on his friend's shoulder and eating ice cream and talking about his most recent breakup? Well, that's not very common amongst men because homophobia is also very prevalent amongst cisgender straight men. And so, when it comes to men, it's seen as gay to cry over a breakup or to show emotions or to basically open up and be vulnerable with other men. So, with those things being said, you're telling me that I'm supposed to desire to dedicate my life, my time, my energy, make sacrifices for, and dedicate my womb to someone who is likely to be less emotionally intelligent than me. This means, you will experience emotional neglect because if someone lacks emotional intelligence, this means that they don't catch on to how you're feeling. So let's say you're sad, let's say you're overwhelmed as a parent, let's say you're feeling exhausted emotionally. A lot of men won't be able to catch on to that. So you're telling me I'm supposed to dedicate the next 80 years of my life to someone who will not even be able to read my facial expressions when I literally have an entire group of girlfriends who literally can tell just by one look on my face how I'm feeling? So you're telling me I have to spend the next multiple decades of my life trying to give a guy all of the answers, trying to explain to him how I'm feeling. That takes emotional energy and that's actually draining. And this is why there are lots of statistics on how when it comes to relationships, a lot of women are pulling the emotional weight or they're kind of like investing more emotionally. That is an example of investing more emotionally. It's when you're constantly trying to explain how you feel, defend how you feel. You're trying to say, hey, I don't like it when you look at other girls' butts and here's why. I don't like it when you still text your ex and here's why. It's because the men oftentimes lack emotional intelligence. And so because of this, They don't understand how the woman is feeling. And that leads me to my next point. Men's definition of love and women's definition of love are two very different things. A lot of men tend to only quote unquote love the things that they have ownership over, or they love the things that give them a sense of status. So, for example, a man may love his career. Why? Because his career gives him money, his career gives him a sense of status, his career gives him a sense of power. And so, if you are not giving him a sense of status and power over you, then a lot of times men will view you as worthless and they will discard you as a woman. So, this is why on my channel I have men who get mad at me, because if you're not a wife, if you're not submitted to a man in some way, or if you're not attached to a man in some way, or pursuing a man in some way, a lot of men will just discard you because you have only a couple of options. You can either be a wife, a mother, or a whore. That's it. That's it. There's no in between. There is no other form of nuance that you can have as a woman. So again, this ties back into my lack of emotional intelligence talking point. A lot of guys are not able to realize the nuances that women have in our lives. A lot of men think that all women are a monolith. A lot of men don't really understand that two things can be true at the same time. A woman can be a single mother and not be a hoe. You know what I mean? Two things can be true at the same time. A woman can be a wife and still want to be a hoe. And by the way, I'm not trying to shame anyone or say that one thing is better than the other, but since we're on this subject, this is another reason why I feel you should decenter men. Because men will build an entire hierarchy based on how you relate to them. So for example, they will rate you on a scale of 1 to 10, and that scale is based on how much do I want you? How much do men want you? So your whole entire worth and rating of your attractiveness is based on the male gaze. Even when it comes to colorism arguments that I hear here on this channel, a lot of times the colorism argument is based on the male gaze. People will say, oh, well, people pedestalize women who are MLS, mixed or light skinned. But it's like, okay, define the term pedestalization. What they really mean is you get treated special by men in particular. You have more dating options. So again, it often ties back to romantic relationships. They'll be like, oh, you are more visible in Hollywood. Well, why is it important to be visible in Hollywood? Oh, because you get to play the love interest in the movie. So again, it's tied back to the male gaze. Oh, well, you get to win all the Grammys and be on all the magazines, and then it causes a beauty trend that affects women in everyday life, and it affects how men treat us in everyday life. So again, it's still revolving around the male gaze. One thing that I've noticed is that the more you begin to decenter men, the more your insecurities will begin to fall off. Because I feel like a lot of women's insecurities, even if we look at marketing, how they market beauty products and stuff like that, a lot of women's insecurities are really based on the male gaze. Oh, I don't want to have acne. Why? Because men don't like women with acne. All of the porn stars and actresses and whatever, they don't have cystic acne in the movies. And so I want to look like the women in the movies. Why? Because the women in the movies are attractive to men. So do you see how it all kind of ties back to men? But if you start to decenter men, then you no longer care really about, if you have a pimple, or if your body doesn't look perfect 24/7, or, if your hair is blending perfectly and all that kind of stuff, because you're not revolving your entire sense of self-esteem and self-worth around men. But let me go back to what I was talking about before. Most marriages either are or will be hypogamous at some point if the woman in the marriage is very ambitious. So let's say you're a woman and you are a builder, meaning you like to start your own businesses and, do your own thing for yourself. Even if your man is a provider, let's say he makes $150K per year and you start off making $50K. What are you going to do once your businesses skyrocket and now you make $200K and he only makes $150? Are you going to begin? Do you really think that your husband is going to let you make $200K and not contribute towards not one bill? No, the average man is going to want to have access to that money. And especially if you guys have children together, the average man who is married to you, he's going to want you to contribute that money to the household, and he will use the talking point, oh, well, that's how I know that you're not being selfish. It's because you're putting money towards the both of us and you are helping both of us to grow. It's no longer just your money, it's our money. I've noticed a lot of men, they like to use this talking point when it comes to marriage. They'll be like, oh, it's no longer your life, it's our life. So even the language when it comes to talking about marriage and stuff, a lot of the language towards women tends to be pretty manipulative. And the expectations placed on women within marriages tend to be much higher than the males. So, for example, let's say you started off making 50K, he made 150K when you first got with him, and then you started making 200K, so now you're making 50,000 more than your man. He's probably, like I said, he will most likely be like, oh wow, as a household, our household income is now 350K. We can get a bigger house now. We can do XYZ now. We can put the kids in private school now. So a lot of men, they will sometimes latch on to the ambitious women who have a lot of money, and then they will begin to gradually want to influence all of your financial decisions, and they'll want to influence what you're doing with the money because in his mind, he owns you because you're his wife. So you're his forever. You know what I mean? So I would say that if you're the type of woman who is very ambitious, let's say you're like an influencer, let's say you are, you do hair or something and it's growing exponentially to the point where you feel like your income can just continue to go up. I do feel like when it comes to marriages, it tends to naturally, there are natural guidelines to marriages, right? There are natural expectations to marriages, such as you guys are both expected to be faithful to one another, through sickness and health, through for richer or for poorer, till death do you part. So a lot of women, they're not even thinking about what the actual marriage vows are. Do you even believe those vows? For richer or for poorer? A lot of women, they don't want to be with a guy who is poor. And this is why I say, I think it's best to just go ahead and decenter men then if you don't want to deal with like a bunch of dust throughout the marriage, because this may happen. Like you can't control a man's future. So yes, a guy might start off making 150K, but let's say he gets sick or something. Let's say he gains a lot of weight and he can no longer do his work like how he used to. Then the woman would have no choice but to step up and become the breadwinner. So this is why I say that I think women, before they choose to get married or pursue marriage, they should begin to think about these things. Like, what level of sacrifices am I willing to make for a man that I quote unquote love, especially when that man's definition of love is different than mine. Because, for example, let's say he started off making 150K and then his business fails or something, or he gets sick and his business goes down. And now you're working 40 hours a week to kind of like make ends meet while he's sick or whatever. And then he's at home jacking off to porn. How would that make you feel? And I want you to genuinely think about this. There is no wrong answer. But let's say he's at home jacking off to porn. We already know that 25% of internet searches in general are for pornography. Most men that you encounter in your everyday life are pornography addicts. And remember, there are many different types of porn. There's not just Pornhub. There's also, OnlyFans girls. There are chat rooms and stuff. There are so many different forms of sex work. So how would you feel if you had dedicated your life to someone, dedicated your womb to someone, dedicated all of your time to someone, and they were doing something like that? So for those of you who don't care if your man looks at porn or whatever, I guess my question for you guys is, what are your boundaries around it? And do you even talk to your husband or boyfriend about that? Do you even ask him, what kind of porn are you looking at? Because I've heard so many horror stories about women who have children who will marry a man and then their husband will be looking at porn of like teenagers and, stepdaddy, stepdaughter types of videos and stuff. And they will have had no idea because they just let it pass. They were like, oh, okay, whatever. Like that's your personal business. Like it's not a big deal. When in reality, it is a big deal because we all know that if you look at sociology, sexuality can be socialized. This is why we see different sexual behaviors from women from the hood. Think of women like the city girls or whatever. Those women were socialized to view their sexuality that way. So the environment that you grow up in sexually, it can affect you. So pornography is another form of media, just like any other form of media. What you watch, the music you listen to, those types of things, they do brainwash you over time and they do influence your desires over time. So by that same metric, that would mean that the pornography you are watching does influence your sexual desires over time. So yes, if a guy is watching child porn or something, I would take that as a huge red flag because no, it's not just a fantasy. A lot of guys, they like to make the argument that, oh no, it's just a fantasy, it's not real, so like it's not a big deal. When in reality, doesn't everything that exists in this world, didn't it all start off as someone's fantasy? Think about the iPhone. That started off as a fantasy in Steve Jobs' head, did it not? Think about the laptop or the device you're using right now. That started off as a fantasy in somebody's head, and that person eventually was able to make it into a reality. So I don't buy this whole mindset that if something is a fantasy, that it can never manifest into reality. No, there's always a possibility for something to manifest into reality. It's just about whether or not that person wants to make it happen or whether or not that person has the resources to make it happen, which leads me to the next talking point about decentering men. Let's say you are with a man and you start off and he makes 150K when you guys get married. And let's say throughout the course of your marriage, this man becomes the next Jeff Bezos. And he becomes, this is very unlikely, but let's say he becomes the next Jeff Bezos and he is now making 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, and he wants to use his newfound wealth and his newfound power however he wants to. Let's say he decides to be stingy with his newfound wealth. Then what are you going to do as a woman? Because I believe that these are things that we should talk about. Because a lot of women say, oh, well, I'll just divorce him or I'll just have babies with him and then I'll get the child support paid off. But a lot of those women who make those talking points have never been divorced. You don't just get a divorce overnight and then you get millions overnight. Some divorces can take years. So what are you going to do in the interim while you are paying all of those legal fees and while you are still having to feed those children and while you are still having to live on your own before you start to get the money that comes from, the child support and stuff? And also, the majority of divorces do not even have alimony. A lot of women, they are thinking about marriage in terms of meeting some sort of Jeff Bezos type of guy and, that's going to be it and they're going to marry him and this is how they would do it. The average man is not Jeff Bezos, for God's sake. The average man that you're going to meet in the middle of South Atlanta is not Elon Musk. You're probably not going to meet Elon Musk while you're twerking at the club. I'm sorry to break it to you. But most men make around what, maybe 50,000? Oh wow. So actually I'm in the process of looking this up right now by state and it's actually less than that. New Jersey, the average for a male is 39,000, Tennessee 39,000, Hawaii 39,000, Nevada 38,000, Massachusetts 38,000. So the average guy is actually only making, anywhere from 30 to, I guess I'll be generous and say 60,000, anywhere from 30 to $60,000. And that's gross, by the way. That's not the net income. And by the way, take away up to 25% of that if that man has kids and is paying some sort of child support or, he's paying for stuff like that. Not to mention a man's past. A lot of men have bad pasts. So maybe they are an ex-felon or, they've got a criminal past or they had a DUI or something. So that also limits their career options. So it's like, why would I, as a privileged woman, why would I then tie my life to a man who is going to probably take away more of my privileges than give to me? A lot of women will be like, oh, I want to date a man so he can pay my bills or whatever. Let's say a man gives you an additional $10,000 a month. Are you telling me you can't make an additional $10,000 a month? You must be underprivileged. Respectfully, you are probably underprivileged because any woman who is, let's say you're pretty, talented, smart, you can easily, or maybe it's not even easy, but you can still find a way to make an additional $10,000 without having to be cheated on, risk getting STDs, birth anybody's babies that you didn't want, sleep with a man that you're repulsed by. And I'm not trying to talk down on the women who do choose to do those things, but I just believe that the decentering men talking point has a lot of nuance to the conversation. And so here in the Pretty Girl Club, I do like to switch up the content every now and again and add some nuance to this conversation because even though we like getting our pretty privilege and all that, I still don't want you ladies to go out and risk being mistreated and risk being abused because, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever met not one woman who has never been abused or harassed by a man. I've not met not one of any race. Every woman that I've ever met in my entire life, regardless of her race or sexual orientation or background or socioeconomic status, no matter what, she has been mistreated by a man, no matter what woman I've met. So no matter what relationship you get into, you are going to deal with mistreatment. And the question that I want to ask to a lot of these married couples who have been together for decades is, what sins of his did you forgive? What was the biggest argument you had in your marriage that you had to overcome? And what types of flaws of his do you have to overlook on a consistent basis in order to maintain that marriage? And I'm asking this respectfully. I'm not trying to like be rude towards anyone. Because I feel like a lot of the women from previous generations, like a lot of women from grandma's generation, were not actually happy. They'll be like, oh, well, it needs to go back how it was with grandma and them. And it's like, a lot of our grandparents were heavily abused and did not have any resources of their own. A lot of our grandparents were uneducated, especially if you're a person of color. A lot of our grandparents may have been uneducated, may have not had as many opportunities, may have not had the leverage to get the things that they wanted in life. And so they had no choice but to be codependent on a man financially. But I think that a lot of us women who are a little bit more financially independent or kind of upwardly mobile, I think a lot of us already see the privileges that we have, especially the pretty privileged women as well. A lot of us already see the privileges that we have. So I feel like for a lot of us, it's kind of like, why would we then give up that privilege or become emotionally stressed out or, pay all this extra money to get a house where we don't even like the decorations? We don't even like how the bedroom looks. Half of our stuff in our home is masculine looking. The kitchen is dirty half the time because the guy doesn't really know how to clean. He doesn't really know how to cook. We have to pretend that we like these nasty jailbird meals that our boyfriend or husband cooks or whatever. How many women truly do view that as living the soft life? So these are just more reasons to decenter men. Another reason, this is actually a biological reason to decenter them, it's because I see this trend on TikTok where a lot of women are saying that men fall in love based on vasopressin, which is the hormone that is released when you are stressed out. And so I see women saying, well, you should stress the guy out and like that's going to make him love you more. First of all, if I have to get an entire science degree and if I have to go through all of these games to try to get a guy stressed out so that he can love me more, I'm already doing it wrong. I don't have the time and energy to play all these games with a guy to try to manipulate him into loving me. Do you really want to spend the next 80 years of your life with a man that you had to manipulate into loving you? That you had to coerce and emotionally try to control so that he could love you? I mean, that just screams desperation to me. So there's that. And then number two, I kind of have a hard time believing that men fall in love based on vasopressin. I actually don't believe that men's definition of love is even the same as women's. But for the sake of this argument, if a man were truly to fall in love based on releasing vasopressin or being stressed out, wouldn't that mean that he would love sex workers, baby mamas, ratchet women, loud women, and abusive women more than you? Because first I see men saying, oh, well, no, you want a woman who can be your peace. And then I see other people saying, oh, well, no, men fall in love based on vasopressin. So which one is it? So I have to be toxic in order to receive love from a man? That doesn't even make any sense. And also, why would I want to take on these artificial toxic behaviors? Let me not text back. Let me do all this random stuff and like be as mean as possible and like randomly cuss him out. I'm not going to expend all of that energy because when you do stuff like that, like arguing back and forth and stuff, that is still releasing cortisol in your body. It's actually stressing you out if you have to argue back and forth with somebody for 2 hours. So I actually don't think that the average woman should be doing that. I don't really think that that's a good way to spend your time and energy. Would you rather spend your time and energy living your best life, or would you rather spend the next 80 years of your life arguing back and forth with a man? I'll wait. Anyway, those are just some more of the reasons that I feel like women should decenter men. And also this whole concept of the wall. It's like, okay, so for example, oh, by the way, tomorrow is my birthday, November 17th. Well, this video may not be up until the 17th, but anyway, my birthday is November 17th. So, but I'm 32 years old. So if I am post wall, or if my value is down and it's low or whatever, if you hit the wall by like age 21 or whatever, then why would we then waste our time trying to pursue these lifetime struggle love relationships with men who, no matter what we do, he's always going to want to fuck someone else. Most of them are porn addicts. Most of them are incels. A lot of them are emotionally unintelligent, or they're emotionally not as intelligent as women, according to Dr. Daniel Amen. You can look him up. So why would we waste our time with that? By the way, if you're still watching this video at this time, I want you to definitely get my Dark Femininity course, because in that course I talk about how to use dark femininity in sex and dating and when dealing with men, and how to basically not get played and stop being put at the bottom of society all the time. I'm tired of seeing women constantly at the bottom. So, anyway, if you're interested in the Dark Femininity course, I will have that linked in the description. Anyway, let me know what you ladies think of this video, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.